Hello everyone, Professor Kurzlook here. So tomorrow is one of the most important primaries of the 2026 season. So we've made a couple videos already about the Michigan race, Abdul El-Sayed versus Haley Stevens, and what this race really means, at least for the contemporary future of the Democratic Party. So El-Sayed, more liberal, more on the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, versus Haley Stevens, more of the what is being described as the moderate wing of the Democratic Party. So I've made a previous video talking about some of their beliefs, their views. Please check that out. But I wanted to make a video about the polling, that really the last polling that we will have before the election tomorrow. So when we look at the newest polling, we see that El-Sayed has a pretty clear lead. If you were to go on and look at betting markets, El-Sayed has a very high probability of winning the primary tomorrow. And so when we look at some of the polling average, which I pulled up, we see in 50+1 polling average, Abdul El-Sayed 52% versus Haley Stevens' 38%. Big lead for Sayed. Emerson College poll. These are Emerson's a good poll, a reliable poll. Shows Abdul up 54% to Haley Stevens 39%. Huge leads right before election day. So that doesn't mean polls are always right, and that's something we'll talk about in a second. That sometimes polling is wrong. However, 10, 15 points advantages are pretty sizable and would have to really be the biggest polling error of 2026. We haven't seen any polling error remotely off like this. I have wanted to make a video. It might not happen till the semester starts when I make it for my students, about how polling works, how it's done, how it's completed, some of the drawbacks of polling. But here we see a pretty big lead by Dr. El-Sayed, and so more than likely he will defeat Haley Stevens tomorrow. So when we think about what this means, like we talked about in a previous video, please check it out, we see that this is really a national test for what the Democratic Party will look like going forward, what the Democratic Party looks like in at least the short term. We know sometimes the shifts in these changes in the party might happen from one election cycle and then peter out, and the party just goes back to what it was a few years ago. However, here it's really this battle for the future of the Democratic Party. So if you turn on places like CNN, if you turn on Fox News, there's this huge debate over what does the future of the party look like. For instance, CNN ran a kind of like little documentary yesterday about what's his name? Sorry, it wasn't in my notes. About Hassan Piker and really this left insurgency within the Democratic Party. And there were some moderates on that documentary saying, no, this isn't where we think we should send the party, because, hey, we want to try to capture those moderate voters. And Hassan Piker counters with, well, our beliefs and our views are more of capturing what the average voter wants. So we know we're living through this massive debate over what does the future of the Democratic Party look like. In this race tomorrow in Michigan is really an important piece of that argument. So if we just believe the polling right now, it does look like Dr. El-Sayed will win. But we won't really know is if that translates into a general election victory. So there have been some moderate Democrats who have been coming out saying, okay, so maybe El-Sayed can win in the primary, but then once they get to the general election, then they have to defeat a Republican. Will that base still be there for El-Sayed? Will they still be able to win in a statewide election that is not just the core Democrats? So it'll be interesting. Tomorrow, again, if we look at the polling, 10, 15 points up, it does look like Dr. El-Sayed will win the primary. And then we'll have to wait a few months to see, does that translate into a general election victory? Because if it doesn't, then the moderates of the party will say, hey, we told you that this wasn't popular. We told you that you might have a small group of people that were very gung-ho to vote in a primary, but that didn't translate into the general election. Conversely, if Dr. El-Sayed can win tomorrow and win in the general election, well, then the more liberal progressive wing of the party will come out and say, hey, look, that electability argument you made, well, you were wrong. We, on the progressive side, not me, but we as on those that are on the progressive side, will come out and say, hey, look, we actually were the better, more electable position. And so we're seeing this really interesting. If you like horse race politics, if you're really into electoral politics, we're seeing this super interesting case study in a few of these states where we can kind of argue and debate about, okay, what is the future of this political party? And then the voters get a say. So, okay, some of the things I put in my notes I did want to cover is just, as we've seen, if you've been following this race at all, the amount of money being spent in this race. We know Haley Stevens is backed by some, a lot of money is backing Haley Stevens. In fact, almost around, I found a couple different figures, so I'm going to just say around $80 million has reportedly been spent on this primary, much of it supporting Stevens' camp. So that does make it, I believe, one of the most expensive Democratic primaries ever. So we know this is a massively consequential election for the future of the party, a consequential election for who controls the Senate, as well as a consequential election for showing how much sway can money have in an election. If Haley Stevens wins with a lot of money, well, it shows, hey, the center of the party and outside groups with a lot of money can still have a lot of sway. El-Sayed will counter if he wins. Look, we defeated a lot of outside money, and the more progressive wing of the party is what's important. So when we think about the election tomorrow, and I'm sure many of us will be watching election coverage tomorrow night, one thing we'll be looking for is what is the actual turnout of the election. Were either candidates able to get a big turnout? We know in primaries it has a lower voter turnout than general elections. So candidates are working hard and they're getting people to phone bank, to door knock, to put flyers on doors, trying to convince people to come out and vote because many people don't vote in primaries. So to win, especially if you're an insurgent candidate like El-Sayed, who is what he considers outside the party norm, he needs a lot of people that maybe don't oftentimes vote in the primaries, or he can excite people to come out and vote. So if we see a really high voter turnout, it'll kind of give us insights into, okay, well, what's actually going on in the Democratic Party. So last thing I wanted to talk about, or could polls be wrong? Absolutely, polls can be wrong, but like we said, a 10 to 15 point lead would certainly be surprising to be wrong. Maybe you're old enough to remember 2016, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. We know the polls were wrong. And so political scientists look at polls and we try to best capture people's perspectives, beliefs, voting habits. They can be wrong. Again, I want to make a video about how that happens, but for our purposes right now, a 10 to 15 point lead would be difficult to misjudge. But again, we'll see what voter turnout's like. Both candidates today, final push, trying to get people to go out and vote. So I'll probably make a video tomorrow updating this a bit. But for now, we'll all be watching tomorrow to see who wins.